Hello friends, family, total strangers. Happy 4th of July. Tonight's video is on... Stop drinking so noisily there, Jax. Tonight's video is on my story part 2. So this is kind of starting at my working life. So I was living in Pocatello. This is circa 1994 with my parents. Had just graduated homeschool and just turned 18. This is in July. And I was looking for work, trying to get out of the house. And there was this ad in the paper for Burger King, which was within walking distance of my parents' house. And so I walked down and applied, and I apparently was not Burger King material. So that, I wasn't Burger King material, did not get hired. That's the low point. And I could be assistant manager there right now, just to think. Yeah, didn't get hired. So it had been over 100 degrees, like 10 straight days in Pocatello, just sweltering hot and terrible. And there was this ad in the paper that said, want cooler temperatures? Come to the beautiful Tetons, where the average high is in the mid-80s. And I thought, okay, that sounds good. And so they were recruiting at the Quality Inn, at a suite at the Quality Inn, which was right across the street from the Burger King, so it was also within walking distance. So I walked down there and filled an application and interviewed, and I didn't hear back after a week, and I kind of thought that, okay, that fell through. I guess I'll have to keep looking, maybe a taco time or something. But a couple days later, I got the call and I got hired. So they picked us up in Idaho Falls. They sent a bus down to Idaho Falls. So my parents drove me up to Idaho Falls, got on the bus, took me to Grand Teton National Park. So this was working for the Grand Teton Lodge Company. And they run 3 lodges in the park, and I got hired. I could have been working at any one of them doing any position. Like, I was hired as like an open person. I had no idea what I was going to be doing. And or even which lodge I was going to be working at. And I got up there, and they sent me to Colter Bay, which is kind of the middle-sized lodge. It had about 200 employees, as opposed to Jenny Lake, which had like 60 employees, and Jackson Lake, which had 600 employees, which is huge. So I got hired on at Colter Bay, and I ended up being a cafeteria helper. So it was mostly doing like prep work for the salad bar and also serving the cafeteria line and cleaning up and that sort of thing. And so I ended up working at Colter for 6 years. I worked at Colter for 6 years, and I did a variety of jobs during that time. I ended up being an employee cafeteria cook. I was a prep cook. I was assistant manager in kind of a fast food style restaurant, and then I was relief manager between that and the regular restaurant for a year. And then that convinced me that I am not a manager, not management material, want nothing to do with it. I also waited some tables in that time, and I also realized that I'm not a waiter. And so my final year in 1999, my 6th summer at Colter, I worked in the tent village, the tent cabins, as an attendant. That was a really slack job. I liked it. It was good. It was fun. It was working outside, and that was my last summer doing that, working at Colter. In the meantime, I was just, for the first few winters, I was just returning to Pocatello, so I wasn't quite out on my own yet, staying with my parents. And then I started working seasonal jobs out in the world. I worked in the Everglades in 98, 99 at Flamingo Lodge and Outpost, which is no longer there. It got wiped out by a hurricane. I forget which one, but several years after my time. And I worked in the Everglades. I worked at Stevens Pass in Washington, which is a ski resort. I worked in Death Valley. And yeah, Death Valley, I was a pantry cook. The Everglades, I was a prep cook. In Stevens Pass, I was a bar back. So I was kind of all over the place, but almost all in restaurant stuff. And then in the year 2000, I was supposed to go back. I wasn't going to go back to Colter. I decided to move to Jackson Hole, move to town. And a friend of mine was going to get an apartment for me and another friend, and it kept being pushed back when we were going to move into it, and then it fell through completely. So by this point, it's the end of June. I don't have a job or a place to live, and I go back to Colter to see if I can get a job back, and I can't. All the jobs are filled at Colter. They are not hiring, but I could have worked at Jackson Lake Lodge line cooking, which is also something I learned I don't like. I love prep cooking. Prep cooking is fun. It's my speed. Line cooking, I don't handle that sort of pressure very well. So I declined that and went to Signal to have a drink and hang out with a friend, and he encouraged me to apply there because they had job openings, and I did, and I got hired as a busser. And so this is in the year 2000, and strange coincidence, I started my first day there on July 4th in the year 2000, so exactly 18 years ago. And that period at Signal Mountain Lodge, I ended up working there for 14 years, so that was a very important place in my life story. It was working and living in Grand Teton National Park. Most of the time I had a deck overlooking the Tetons, and it was amazing. It was right on Jackson Lake. It was just a short walk down to the lake, and that was a good way to spend those formative years. It was really awesome. And so those first 3 years, I was just a summer seasonal person. I was a busser. And then in the winters, I would go off and do other things. And then starting in 2003, I got hired on as the night auditor. I took that job because you get your own room as the night auditor there, which was awesome. So I didn't have to share a room with somebody. I had my own room. And again, I had my deck overlooking the Tetons. And I ended up doing that night audit job for 11 years. And I was also hired on to work there in the winter. So I became a year-round employee. So this is starting in 2003. That winter, they hired me on to do reservations 2 days a week and shovel snow off of cabin rooftops 3 days a week, which was really hard work. And it was pretty miserable. Everybody else would be inside all warm and toasty and sipping hot cocoa and chatting with each other, and you're working by yourself outside, 20 below, ice in my beard, and just like standing on a slick rooftop with a shovel, like cutting the snow and then throwing it off, and doing that all day long. And that was that was funny. Now I look back and was like, why did I do that? For 8 years. I did that for 8 years. And then the last 3 years I was just reservations, which was much better. But it gave me a chance to live up there in the winters, and I really did love living up there. Winters there are really long and cold. So it did kind of, over time, break me of wanting to be around anywhere cold in the winter. But I really enjoyed my time there. And I enjoyed the winters there. They were very chill, really good, small, close-knit group of employees that lived up there in the winter, because they were closed in the winter, so it was just reservations, maintenance, and then the upper management. But it was a Signal Mountain Lodge was a really great place to work. It really informed my life in a lot of ways. And it really helped define who I am as a person as well. So I really appreciate those years. I really appreciate Signal Mountain Lodge. The management there is great. They pretty much all worked their way up from the bottom. They were all entry-level people when they started that are running the lodge, that are the GMs and assistant GMs and F&B directors, and they all worked their way up. And it was a really great place, and I really enjoyed my time there. But I just got to a point where it was time to move on. So I moved to Jackson, and I got a job at a liquor store just as a regular employee. You know, I'd help customers, I'd stock shelves, and I would, you know, spend time between that and then also working the register. And then about 3 months in, I think I was just about at my fill of it, you know, because I wasn't making that much money and I wasn't really that into it. And I got promoted to inventory manager. And I ended up doing that for another year and 9 months. So all said and done, I worked 2 years at the liquor store. And at first I was really excited. You know, it's like, oh, I'm getting this big promotion. I'm a salary employee. I'm actually making more money than I've ever made in a year doing this. But there was a huge caveat. I got 2 weeks of paid vacation a year, and that's all I could take. And I couldn't take those 2 weeks consecutively because there was nobody else that could do my job. My job, I was the only inventory person, and I also was the warehouse manager, and so I'm doing all the receiving and everything. So there was nobody else to do my job, so I couldn't just take off for 2 weeks. Or I'd gotten to the point at Signal Mountain where I was taking a month off in the off season and traveling. I was going to Europe and various other places. And yeah, that was right out the window, and it really dampened my spirits and really bummed me out. And that's when I hatched, if I'm only going to be able to have, you know, a week off at a time, 2 weeks out of the year, what if I just start planning for early retirement, which was where I hatched my Thailand idea, which was to move to Thailand when I was 50. And then that kind of broke down because I didn't want to do it forever. I didn't want to work 12 years doing that job, because I really love to travel, and only having a week at a time to travel really, really bummed me out. And I have to spend some time, you know, going to see my family too. They're getting older, my parents. And so it really bummed me out and really put things in perspective for me. And so I was going to work it for 12 years and then retire at 50. And Thailand is really cheap, and you can get a retirement visa when you hit 50. There's certain requirements, but I was going to meet those, and I was going to do that. And then reality kind of set in that I didn't want to do this for 12 years. So I decided that I could half retire, and then I would live in Thailand for 6 months of the year and live in Jackson for 6 months. And then I realized I don't want to try to find an apartment every 6 months in Jackson, especially for the summer. It's really hard to find a place to live. So I ended up thinking, well, maybe I could live in a van or something. That's when I kind of went down the whole van road. And I eventually just cut Thailand out of it and decided, you know what, I can just live in a van. And I don't even necessarily have to work in Jackson for the summers, although I'm doing it this summer. And it's just freed up like this bit that was missing in my life, you know, this ability to travel. And even when I worked at Signal, when I finally got to the point where I was getting a month off, that still just didn't seem enough. And now that I'm, you know, I work pretty much 5 months out of the year, or at least I have the last 2 years, and I just travel the other 7 months. It's been amazing. And yeah, that's pretty much my story. I now live in a van and travel. I mostly live in a van to travel. So I don't even really think of myself as a van dweller so much as I think of myself as a full-time traveler who has a van and bases himself out of it. But yeah, that's my story. So when I did that camping trip in the last video, I also did a couple hikes. So I'm going to show footage from those here now. So here's my hikes.
Come on, Jax! Come on, boy! Jax! Come on! Come on, buddy! Muggy! Muggy!
So yeah, those hikes were out the Grovant, in the Grovant River area, out in the Red Hills and Lavender Hills. Beautiful out there, really awesome. Kind of, it's the north end of the Grovant Mountains, and yeah, I think in the last My Story video, I was in the south end of the Grovant Mountains, the Granite Creek area. This is the Grovant River and Crystal Creek area. But yeah, really beautiful. And our camping spot, I think, was Wedding Tree Hill. But yeah, really awesome. So, you know, if people have said, you know, like, was it hard for you to transition from a normal life to van living? I think I've demonstrated I didn't really have a normal life. You know, I didn't have furniture. I didn't have all these things that you would normally have because I was living in, you know, resort housing. And so switching from that to living in a van really wasn't that as big of a stretch as it is for the average person. So it was a very easy transition, much easier than most people would have. You know, because I was already living kind of seasonally, and pretty much whatever I could fit into my car is what I had, moving from resort to resort until I finally settled in at Signal. But yeah, that's my story. So thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. Thanks a bunch.